climbs off all by itself. It does it itself. Okay?
Yeah, you're right there with me though.
Every time I open the hangar door to go flying, I realize that I'm one of the lucky guys doing something that I dreamt of as a kid.
Oh, did you? Yeah. 23 now? No, I went and got one blank. Oh, okay. Get somebody
I love to fly. I learn something every time I fly, and I enjoy it. And to be able to fly a Mustang at my age is something very special. And not just a Mustang, say a Mustang painted like mine.
Do you realize that I've had 4 different airplanes, Old Crows, and there's 2 still up, 2 of them are still flying. One of them crashed and one got sold and is being repainted at the moment. But when I was able to fly those things, I don't know, it was a special event. I think you can imagine.
I tell my non-drinking friends or my Baptist friends that it's named after the most intelligent bird that flies in the sky, the crow. And that generally is recognized. The crow is a very cagey bird. But my drinking buddies all know it's named after that good old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey.
November 1910, Eugene Ely took off from a modified Navy cruiser on the Virginia coast, flying a Glenn Curtiss airplane. 2 months later, Ely landed on a different ship in San Francisco Bay. Naval aviation was born. Training soon moved from Virginia to Pensacola, Florida, which is the cradle of naval aviation. Every naval and marine aviator to this day traces his or her start in flying to Pensacola. Every Navy aircraft ever flown is housed in the Naval Air Museum at NAS Pensacola. If you love airplanes, especially Navy airplanes, you will love visiting this incredible museum and its National Flight Academy for 7th to 12th graders on Fetterman Way at the museum. The Navy's first ace was Naval Aviator number 85, David Ingalls, in 1918. Flying a British Sopwith Camel for the RAF, he shot down 5 German airplanes in 6 weeks. Plane design and production proceeded unstopped for the next 20 years, and by World War II, naval aviation had become a power to defend our way of life, particularly in the Pacific Theater, after the surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. Just 4 months later, in April 1942, Jimmy Doolittle led 16 Army Air Corps B-25 bombers from the Navy carrier Hornet in a daring raid. They accurately and successfully bombed targets in Japan that sent a strong message to the Japanese leadership. The message: you made a huge mistake bombing America. Navy planes dominated in the Pacific War. Fighters, the Grumman Cat series, the Wildcat, the Bearcat, the Tiger Cat, and the Hellcat. Hellcat pilots shot down over 5,000 Japanese airplanes in the Pacific. The late Alex Vashew, the Navy's 4th-ranking ace, said that he loved his Hellcat so much that if it could cook, he'd marry it. And we have 2 magnificent cat airplanes to explore today, a Hellcat and a Bearcat. To do that with us, Rob Collings and Warren Peach. Rob is chief pilot and executive director of the Collings Foundation in Stowe, Massachusetts. He soloed at 16 and today has more than 3,000 hours in several of the Foundation's aircraft. Warren has more than 35,000 hours in a variety of aircraft. He is also an award-winning airshow pilot and is chief pilot of the Dakota Air Museum that flies Warbirds all over the world.
Good morning again. We have the Bearcat and the Hellcat here. Bearcat there, Hellcat here. Let's get these gentlemen seated down here. Okay. Here we have Rob Collins. He's with the Collins Group. And we'll just start off, tell us a little bit about your museum or your foundation.
The Collins Foundation was started back in 1977 to preserve living history events. It wasn't designed to have aircraft initially. It was based around transportation events and cars. And that all changed in the mid-1980s because of events like Oshkosh and the CAF Air Show, of going there and seeing these aircraft and wanting to preserve the history. Since 1989, we've had the Wings of Freedom Tour, a B-17 Flying Fortress, B-24 Liberator, and later a Mustang, a Mitchell, and this year a P-40 Warhawk that tour around the country. And we've been to over 3,400 different tour locations in the last 30 years, bringing these aircraft to the public. But a lot of what we do is around these other airplanes. From World War I aircraft up to the Vietnam era, we have a core collection of very historic airplanes that are not on tour all the time, like this Hellcat, which we are sharing with you today.
Okay, now, next we over here, we have our, actually Stu's a little fill-in. And then we have Warren Peach over here. Warren, his airplane is down. They've got a maintenance problem, but he's here to represent that particular airplane. But we got to talk to Warren and Ron here.
All right,
And
Sam.
go ahead.
My name's Warren Peach. I'm with the Dakota Territory Air Museum, and I brought Stu Dawson in here to fill in for me because, as Sam was just saying, our airplane didn't make it here today because of maintenance issues, and I'm sure you'll all understand that. Tom Woods is generous enough to bring his Bearcat over here, so we've got one to look at anyway, and we sure appreciate that. I personally haven't flown a Bearcat. Stu test flew our airplane before it was before it had the maintenance issue, and so
That's why we have Stu here.
that's exactly right. Yeah, I could talk about the museum and other airplanes, but certainly not very smart about a Bearcat. Dakota Territory Air Museum works in conjunction with Mr. Bruce Ames, who's here in the audience today with us, and he's the guy that sponsored the Bearcat and some of the other airplanes you'll see here, the Spitfire and Lopes Hope, the Mustang. The museum in Minot, North Dakota has been there for 33 years now. We're about 55 airplanes. We've got about a dozen World War II aircraft that we fly out of there, and they fly on a fairly regular basis, do some air shows and some demonstrations and a lot of veteran work and educational programs. The Bearcat that we're working on is being done down in Breckenridge, Texas by Ezel Aviation. The airplane was purchased from Mr. Dusty Dowd, who collected up parts for 3 Bearcats over a 32-year period and is still involved in helping us finish that airplane. Really happy to be here. Glad to see a good crowd like this, and hopefully we'll answer some questions.
Rob, tell us a little bit about the Hellcat. What was it designed for? Did it fill its mission?
Did the Hellcat fill its mission? Yeah, I would say so. The Hellcat was designed to be an air superiority fighter in the Pacific, carrier-based. It was designed to destroy the Japanese Zero, which was kind of wreaking havoc with us earlier in the war. So the first mission flown by a Hellcat was September of 1943, and they used them till the end of the war, and in total they had about 5,200 victories for the loss of 270 Hellcats in air-to-air combat. And that was a 19-to-1 kill-to-loss ratio. That's the best ever for any piston-powered fighter, and a record that stood until the F-15. 300-plus aces were made in Hellcats. And to put in perspective what 5,200 victories is like, the Mustang didn't even break 5,000 in Europe. And you think of the number of P-51s that were there. So this is arguably, it's definitely the greatest naval fighter of all time. Historically, I would say one of the top 2 airplanes in the Pacific for the reasons we won the war. Without it, without the SBD or Hellcat, I don't think we would have won the war in the Pacific. And they built over 12,000 of these. And that's a pretty remarkable number considering the shorter time period that they had, just about 2 years of production. And that was only one factory doing that. When you look at other aircraft production, you know, as impressive as the B-24 production was at 18,000, that was spread over 4 factories. But this was just the Grumman factory churning out these aircraft, and that's a remarkable feat.
What horsepower? Give us a little specs on this thing, horsepower and armament.
The Hellcat's got the Pratt & Whitney 2800 on it. It's got a 2-stage blower, about 2,000 horsepower. It's not necessarily a fast airplane. The Corsair's a lot faster, Mustang's a lot faster, a lot of airplanes are quicker, but it climbs very well and it turns exceptionally well. And the air war in the Pacific was different than Europe, and it was built for that air war.
What horsepower does it have now? 12?
2,000.
2,000. Okay, but how about the armament? What armament does it have on it?
Hellcat was equipped with 650 caliber machine guns, and that's the way it remained throughout the war. You look at the Dash 3 and the Dash 5, there were very little changes to the airplane throughout its production run.
Well, now you've flown it a good bit. How does it fly compared to the other Warbirds?
It's a beautiful flying airplane. Don't tell keep your ears closed. It's so easy to fly. And that was really one of its greatest traits is stability. You made an airplane, Grumman built an airplane that was easy for that 20, 21-year-old kid to fly because now he's going to fly it on and off of an aircraft carrier. It's a great gun platform, and you could see why this airplane made a lot of aces.
Does it have any quirks when you're flying at all?
I wouldn't say any quirks. I mean, it's very Grumman when you're in the airplane. Kind of feels like a TBM or Wildcat right in between. It's just kind of a Grumman feel to it. Every airplane has their quirks, but there's really no bad habits it has. You can pull on this airplane and it's docile in the stall. Again, great for the fighter pilot. You don't want to make the airplane so tough where it's going to kill the pilot before he gets into combat.
Right.
And there was a lot of airplanes like that. There were really great fighter planes once the pilot learned how to fly them. Reason why the Hellcat had such a great kill-loss ratio in the Pacific, one reason, was the Corsair came in late. Corsair's a great airplane, but it was just a little too tricky on the carriers. They didn't put it out there. And they said, why bother? We have this thing. It's a killer. 19-1. How do you beat it?
Not very well.
Not very well.
Now, Vince, I understand that you had a great deal to do with the restoration of this airplane, and you probably know all the history of it. And so it might take 2-3 hours maybe to go through this.
The history? Rob probably has a better handle on the actual history of the airplane, but...
well, whoever. I don't care.
If you want the history of the airplane, if you want the history of the restoration, I can tell you that.
We'll do that.
So my name's Vince Santarelli. I was project manager on the restoration. We took us 7 years, but we didn't work on it continuously. When the tour aircraft come in, we're off of it for 4 months out of the year. But it was a great project to start with. It was all there, which that's not always the case. But I guess 4 of us worked on it full time, and then near the end, of course, we had to recruit a few more people. But very nice project. We had to, the airplane was used in a technical school in the Marine Corps, and they had cut a swath out of the side so you could see the internal structure. And that had been repaired by when Walt Ulrich restored the airplane in the late 60s. And, but we went back and reskinned one whole side of the airplane to make it look the way it left the factory.
What is the history of the airplane?
This airplane was built in January of 1944, rolled off the assembly line January 15th. Kind of an interesting story. It's the third pilot who flew it on a test flight was a female. Her name was Cecil Teddy Kenyon, and Teddy learned to fly in the late 20s. She was an aerobatic champion in 1933. She won $5,000 in an aerobatic prize, which in 1933, $5,000 was a lot of money. And she went out and bought a Waco. But during World War II, she was one of 3 female test pilots that Grumman had. In fact, I don't know if they can put it up on the screen. She was even featured in a Camel cigarette ad, a very comic book-looking cigarette ad, and she at the top says, "I tame Hellcats." So she was a bit of a legend at that time, a real pioneering aviatrix. From there, it was delivered on January 20th to Floyd Bennett Field and accepted by the Navy. And from January 20th up till September of 44, it was assigned to VFN 76, which was assigned in the Pacific at that time. It was on 5 different carriers. And that was part of the time frame of the Marianas Turkey Shoot and quite a lot of historical era. We don't know what carrier it was assigned to, because the Navy records just say it's assigned to this squadron. In talking with some of the pilots who were part of that squadron, they said everything went overseas. They were in Quonset, Rhode Island at the time when they went over in January of 44, and they took everything. There was no squadron left in the U.S. A lot of them became aces, and I was really fortunate to talk to 3 of the pilots a few years ago before most of them passed away. And one of them, Buck Dungan, was an ace, and we have some copies of his logbook, and it's just so fascinating to look at it. I mean, these guys were in the thick of it, and in his logbook, they didn't necessarily get kill marks painted on the side of their aircraft because they didn't have their aircraft. They were rotating through airplanes, so they had little rubber stamps of Japanese flags, of Japanese Navy flags, and there's, in one line, there's 4 of them on one flight. And on that mission, he shot down 4 roof float planes, and then he said he went and attacked a destroyer. It was at night. These were night fighters, and he came in, strafed it from one direction. He said, and then I came in, dove down on it, strafed it from the top. He goes, it was the safest thing I ever did, because they were shooting in the wrong direction everywhere, because it was at night. They couldn't see where he was coming from. But you can imagine the courage of this guy. And also, how much ammunition did he have? He just shot down 4 aircraft, and now he's strafing a destroyer. But that turned out to be his last mission because he actually did get a bullet through his shoulder, landed on the wrong carrier, and went home, and his airplane was, unfortunately, that one was pitched over the side. So most of these airplanes, the Navy on an aircraft carrier, they weren't fixing much. Spark plugs, cylinders, maybe little basic patches, but if the airplane had any damage and they were close enough to going back to Ulithi to offload it, they would. If not, it got pitched over the side and they got more airplanes out there. You think about the number of airplanes that were actually sitting on carriers, it's a small number comparatively to the 12,000 that were built because they were rotating them through so quick.
Now, was this primary a night fighter his whole career?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because we don't know. After World War II, as Vince said, it became an instructional airframe in the Navy. It was at Norfolk, and they had opened up the right side of the fuselage. Part of that instruction was they took the right wing and they threw it away. So we don't know what the right wing looked like, if it had screw holes in it for the radome or not. In the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, Walt Ulrich, which is probably a name familiar to a lot of people in Warbirds of America, restored
the
founder, yeah, kind of an important role, isn't it?
Right.
He restored this aircraft, and the wing panels were new. They were sitting in the crate at that time, brand new Grumman wing panels. They figured we'll put those on. The engine, they had one, and fortunately, the logbook on the engine's a little more complete. We know it was built by Nash Kelvinator. And it went to the Pacific, and it flew combat, the engine did, and we still have that original engine on the airplane. But they got it rebuilt, and they flew it for about 10 hours until someone in the Department of the Navy said, what in the world are you guys doing? You can't be flying this airplane around. And it was parked, and it remained a museum piece until about 2011, 2012, when we were able to do a trade with the Marine Corps through the Navy and acquire this airplane, which was a great win-win. They got something they wanted, and we have this Hellcat, and we're kind of the proud second owner. The first owner was the United States Department of the Navy, and that's pretty rare. As Vince said, the restoration, it was a complete aircraft, straight from the military, never a sport plane, never stripped out like most aircraft we might have, never had an accident. It was a real special aircraft. So when you look at it, when you look at the rivets that are in it, the side of the right side, these are rivets that were shot in Bethpage in late 1943. Rosie the Riveter actually was working on it. It's a very special airplane.
Right. How successful was the Navy with their night operation?
They were quite successful. So VFN 76 was the first squadron deployed to the Pacific as a night fighter squadron. And they had a large number of victories, a number of aces, night aces. The pilots would fly during the day too, because, get around Mariana's turkey shoot, there was a lot of activity going on, and everyone wanted to get in on that. But they were assigned for night carrier protection. Some Navy captains did not like the night fighters being on board the ships. They wanted to rely on their radar and their air defense and not have other aircraft up. They didn't want to tax their deck crews, where they have to be working 24 hours a day. So there were certain carriers where they didn't want to use them. Later in the war, they assigned one carrier that would be just for night protection. So they would be on a different side of the clock.
Okay, thank you very much. Stu, tell us a little bit. Now, Stu is a retired. Give it to Stu. Oh, he's got one. Oh,
Yeah,
he's got his on his
yeah,
head.
it
Look
works.
at that. Look at that. Oh, gosh, you look real important. Stu Dawson is a retired airline pilot for Southwest. He's an FAA examiner on numerous airplanes, Warbirds, and he's flown numerous Warbirds. I'm not going to even get to the point. I don't think I could read them all. And he's with Lewis Air Legends. You want to tell us a little bit about Lewis Air Legends before we start talking about the Bearcat?
Well, Rod Lewis started really collecting about 15 years ago, and he's kept at it, and he's built up quite a collection of aircraft, and he's really dedicated to it. We've got one of his here, and
go ahead and mention it.
Huh?
Go ahead and mention it. Tell us what it is.
The Mosquito.
And that'll be here Friday at 2 o'clock, folks. So
But
please come back.
He's a very avid fan of the Bearcats. He's got 4 of those. And he's got a -1 and 2 -2s and a, well, if you call it a Bearcat, he's got Rare Bear.
Is this the -1 and the Bear? By the way, Stu is the pilot for Rare Bear.
The aircraft that they have is a -1, and this is a -2. There's a few little differences.
Okay. Very little difference.
Very little difference. The tail's a little taller. I think with the -1, they found out they needed a little bit more tail because it kind of sits there and fishtails a little bit. But
okay, now what was the design mission of this? To replace this airplane?
no, this thing's more of an interceptor than it is a fighter. I mean, it's got real good performance. It won't turn with this one as hard, but it'll climb 6,000 feet a minute. And that's what it was used for. It was get up there, shoot, and get down. It only carried about 230 gallons worth of fuel, so you weren't going very far. But it's a real high-performance airplane. It's a great airplane.
What power plant do you have in it?
These had 2800s like this, except they're a little bit later model engine. There were 30W, and they're 2,250 horsepower.
Now, did this see service in the World War II?
Yeah, but it was late. It was late.
Very late?
Very late, but it did.
Mostly Korea, right?
Yeah, it was a hot rod. It was the best that they had back then. The only other airplane that'll kind of keep up with this is a Sea Fury.
Okay. How about a little bit about the specs, about the how much ammo it carried, what have you, and where it carried?
The airplane weighed gross 13,000 pounds. That's what they grossed it at. It's got a 35-foot wingspan on it, and it's a great airplane to fly. It likes the 3-point position. It's very stable. It's a real easy airplane to fly. I think the Hellcat's a little bit more. It's a little tamer than this thing, but it's the performance of this thing is it just makes you smile.
Now, was this all in the Pacific that they flew this? What little they flew it in?
I don't know exactly where they had it. I'm not the one for the historian. This guy right here can help you out on that.
I'm sorry. Say again.
Say again. Hello.
I've gone dead here. There you go.
Oh, now you're back.
Yeah, now I'm back. Okay. Do you know?
Well, I don't have near the accuracy that Rob's been talking about, and I'm a little bit ashamed I don't know more about the Bearcat than I do. As I understood the airplane, the Hellcat was the dogfighter. It was out there fighting against the qualified Japanese pilots in actual dogfight situations. And by the time the Bearcat came along, it came along as a interdiction against kamikazes, and where they really needed an interceptor, something to launch off the ships, go up and get those airplanes out of the way. And it was designed, like Stu was saying, to be basically just up and down and get the job done. I think it had a various different armament depending on which airplane they were flying, whether it had cannon or machine gun in it and stuff. It depended on what they decided to do with the airplane and its mission. I think they were also used in Indochina by the French quite a bit, and for some of that wars at the beginning of Vietnam and stuff. And so the airplane did have a fairly long career as a fighter, but not all with the U.S. It was used in some other governments and stuff. And so you know, a real high performance airplane, and just leading into the jet age, it was also the first airplane that the Blue Angels flew, I believe, for their act too.
Does it have any unusual design characteristics like the Corsair with the inverted gull wing or any of that stuff like that?
I think maybe the most unique thing about a Bearcat was the original wingtip design for releasing the G-loads on the airplane, and Stu might be able to talk to that a little more intelligently, but as I understand it, and I'm happy to be correct if I'm wrong, but the airplane was designed originally that if you over-G'd it, the wingtip would break off, and if the wingtip broke off, it would set off an explosive device to make the other wingtip depart, so it was even in its handling characteristics and go back and land. And I think they got rid of that after they had some accidents on deck and had some people injured.
That didn't work.
Yeah.
I would call that unique.
But an interesting idea. Later on in life, they started designing airplanes with what they call load relief systems, and I think that was a real early on shot at that, you know. But, at that time in our history, things were happening pretty fast, and I think the ideas came out and were developed and tried in combat instead of testing situations.
Well, they did R&D in combat.
Yeah,
How many of these are still flying?
Boy, I don't know. There's quite a few out there. Not
Make
as many.
it-
Not
make
not
up
like
something.
Mustangs.
These people don't know the difference.
I know where. I know where
here,
four
folks.
of them are.
Yeah.
And this Tom Woods, he's had this one forever. And
Are they any in Europe, do you know?
There used to be. Stephen Gray had one over there, but has he still got that one? Yeah. Does he? I hadn't seen it fly in a while.
How about Hellcats? How many are they still flying? Do you know?
Want me to? Well, I think, of course, correct me too, but I think there's 5. This would be the 6th one that's capable.
I think this is the 5th one right
Fifth
now.
one.
This
and
fifth
there's
one, and then
several others under
there's one
restoration.
under construction there at Breckenridge.
Yeah, you got one in Breckenridge,
Idaho.
which is Rods.
Yeah.
You got the one in Idaho, one or couple, and then Fagan's.
Fagan.
So 3, and if this is a new one, it's pretty amazing because the population of Hellcats is going to double. It's going to go from 4 to 8 in a period of just a few years, which is wonderful because it's a very rare airplane.
Yeah, what's your paint job supposed to represent?
Well, we left it in a bad neighborhood, and people started writing on it, it appears. I know who did part of it. But it's delivery paint scheme. This is the way it rolled off the assembly line. So that 476 you see on the nose that was spray painted on there, that's the last 3 digits of the bureau number.
Okay.
And that way they could just look out on the flight line really quick and see that. And then on the prop, you'll see it says gas okay. And when the pilot went out to do a test flight, they knew the gas was okay, and Tom's going to go fly it.
Okay. How about the color scheme of this one over here? Do you guys know?
That's typical Navy color scheme. They painted them all like that.
How about your airplane that you've got at home now that doesn't fly, by the way?
Yeah, thanks. Keep rubbing that in. I really appreciate it. It's dark blue like this in the common deal. It's got a big B on the tail because it flew off of the aircraft carrier Boxer, and we have a nice series of pictures of the airplane both launching and trapping on the carrier and stuff. And so it has some military history and some, it served, and so it was painted up to represent what it was when it flew with the Navy.
How long did it take you guys to do your restoration, and what's its history?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Dusty Dowd started collecting parts for Bearcats 32 years ago, I believe. Now, or maybe even more than that, if you include the restoration. And Bob Odegaard and Dusty and Jerry Beck and I were all talking about things at one point in time. And over the years, it ended up that Dusty kind of realized that it was probably a bigger project than he was going to get done. So he agreed to sell the collection to Bruce Ames, and Bruce contracted with Ezel Aviation to restore the airplane. It was a really complete set of airplanes. Great collection of not just parts, but also complete aircraft that had various sorts of damage. One of them had landed short of a runway and flipped on its back, and that's the airplane that we're restoring right now. And this whole, it still went all the way down to nothing, It's not quite like this. I don't think it's got this many original rivets in it like the Hellcat does, but it took it all the way down just to make sure everything is straight, and it's got all new spars in it. And
how close to you to having it restored?
Well, it flew once. Stu flew the airplane, and we had a mechanical issue with it. Yeah. I liked watching it, and I was sitting in it getting ready to go fly it when they pulled the oil screen and found some debris in the screen, and we elected not to fly it. So, I mean, I really would like to fly a Bearcat, and I was about that close when they pulled me out of it. And I was like, man, that just ain't right. I don't know what to... August, we're hoping for August. We were really, really hoping to have this here, and you know, it's just an ongoing series of things. The impeller was in to be balanced for the supercharger, and the balancing machine broke, and they sent it to another place, and they had problems. And I mean, everybody here knows what that's like, I think. And so the airplane's sitting there waiting to just bolt the engine in and go fly it again, and we hope to do that in August.
Now, does it have a particular color scheme that you picked out?
Well, as I was saying before, it's in the...
No, but is it for a particular squadron or anything like that?
It flew off of the Boxer, and it's a aircraft 209 is the side on, is just as it was with the Navy when it flew.
It's not a particular pilot's airplane then?
No.
Okay.
It's a real stunning restoration.
Real pretty airplane.
I mean, it's nice. It really is.
Maybe next year.
Yes.
Tell me, what does it mean to you guys to fly these airplanes to these different air shows and have the people look at it and admire it like we have today? Personally, what does it mean to you?
I'll start out that. I've told this story many times, but I painted a picture of a P-51 on the wall in my bedroom when I was 10 and started dreaming. And kept working towards it, and my whole life I thought it was about the airplanes. I thought, man, I'm going to get to fly this airplane, and it goes really fast, and it's really going to be something. And once I got involved in it and started meeting the veterans and their families and hearing the stories, it became obvious to me that the airplane was a tool to get to those people and to use that airplane as a tool for honoring and educating people. And I can't help but, I flew a Spitfire down here this time that flew 74 missions in World War II, and you can't help but sit in that airplane and think about some young kid that came out of Poland and was in England fighting for his country, and trying to correlate that to what we're going through today in the world and what our responsibilities are, and to be able to look at some of those veterans and thank them and help them, I think, get through some of the stuff that were challenges for them throughout life, and to remember some of that stuff and be able to retell their stories is the biggest honor I could ever imagine. And if you can include some young people in those experiences and let them see what it took to maintain the freedoms of this country and the free part of the world, I think that's really the important part. It's a lot more than just a pretty go-fast airplane. It's a piece of history that needs to be used and used as entertainment too. Part of our motto at our museum at home is we're there to honor, educate, and entertain. And the entertainment is the hook. That's how you get people to come and look. But then once you get them in this situation, then you got to get on your soapbox and you got to tell a story. And you got to try to make people realize that this wasn't a fun time in our country's life, and it wasn't a fun time in those kids' life either. And it's something that we're all very fortunate that they did what they did. That's what it means to me.
Yeah. Rob? Rob, you're an owner and a pilot, and a lot of the owners that bring these in, they say, I'm the caretaker of this airplane. I'm not the owner, I'm the caretaker. What do they mean by that?
Well, I'm not the owner. The Collins Foundation is, and it's set up as a nonprofit.
Well, your company then.
Because we want it to be here into perpetuity. We want a succession plan that goes well beyond my lifetime and can keep these aircraft to share these stories, just to amplify everything that Warren said. We all believe in that. That's why we're here. We just love the veterans, and I would encourage everyone here, if you meet a veteran, especially the World War II veterans, take some time to hear their stories. It is absolutely remarkable. And we don't want to stop there. The Korean veterans, Vietnam, all the way up through today. They have very important stories, and we're very, very thankful for their sacrifices. So, yeah, a lot of us believe we're just going to be a temporary caretaker, a custodian of these aircraft. They'll outlive us if we do our jobs right. And we need to do that. But you need to do that by passing it on to the next generation with the young kids. And, you know, there's a lot of our staff, including our chief pilot. Yeah, there's a picture of him sitting in the B-24 when it did a tour stop as a young kid, and now he's the chief pilot. And hopefully he inspires the next young kid who's going to be taking this into the future, because we're not going to be taking into the future all that long. And if we forget this history, it's lost. And we can never forget what happened. We can never have a repeat of World War II.
Well, I know from personal experience, because I was lucky enough to fly the B-17 for 20 years on tour, that when we first started, there were a lot of World War II veterans that came out to the airplane. I'm sure you had that too when you first started. And there was times that's the first time they'd seen that airplane since the Second World War, and they had good and mostly bad memories from it. Lost their friends, what have you. And I remember one instance, a gentleman came up to me, and he had gotten his crew together, the ones that were left, they had been shot down. And he said, I'm going to tell you something about the B-17, whether you want to know it or not. He started telling this story. And unfortunately, I don't remember the whole particulars of the story, but it's about him being shot down and who they'd lost. The point being that when he got through, his wife came up to me and said, he just told you more about the Second World War than he's told me in 20 years. And it opens to the veterans and to their children and their grandchildren. When you bring these airplanes, they want to see what their father, their grandfathers flew. And it opens up some. Go ahead.
And that's a lot of the connection being made now. There's a lot of family members that are coming out and interacting with these aircraft because they might not have heard their dad's story.
Right.
But you're 100% right. What EAA has done with their B-17, what we've done with our tour and CAF and so forth, it's given people a location to go to get together. And the number of folks that have come out, you know, kids and grandkids with grandpa, and he'll start telling stories about when he was a B-17 pilot, and they go, Dad, what? I knew you were in World War II, but you were a pilot? They'd have no idea. Right. And it's not until they get together and they have that place to share those stories, will they? And it's been wonderful. I remember Warbirds in review here 2 years ago. We had the Spitfire. Unfortunately, none of the pilots who ever flew our airplane are still alive.
Right.
But one of the sons flew up from Australia to be part of it because his father flew with that airplane on the first 8th Air Force mission, and it meant so much for him to come all the way from Australia to talk about the experience.
And hopefully he keeps that legacy going with his children and grandchildren.
Absolutely.
How about you, Stu?
Well, you know, keeping this alive is the most important thing. And I'm involved with checking people out in these airplanes and teaching them how to fly, and that's what I do. The generation that flew these airplanes in World War II is fast leaving us. And if you get a chance to talk to any of these people, you need to, and get their stories out of them and everything, because it's incredible what they did with these airplanes. These aren't jets. They don't go, 500 miles an hour. And the distances that they had to go and the things that they had to do to make this work is incredible.
Yeah.
So we need to get the younger people involved, and nothing's better than take a kid, put him in this airplane, and take him for a flight. I mean, it makes their day, and it really makes mine.
Thank you. Folks, we've got a little time here. We're going to have a question and answer. We've got experts here. So if you'll raise your hand, they'll bring the mic to you. Try not to shout at us. We're all hard of hearing.
Is it on? Good morning. 3 real quick questions. Is the Hellcat flying this week? Is the Mosquito flying this week? And Mr. Dawson, are they selling those T-shirts?
I don't know about the Hellcat.
No on the Hellcat till Sunday.
Okay. Yeah, the Mosquito is going to fly. And The shirts are over there.
Okay.
Hi, for someone who flies a light tailwheel, so Super Cubs, et cetera, what do you think are the right airplanes to start getting experience before you can start flying some of these heavier World War II aircraft?
My recommendation would be Stearman, then T6.
That's what they were made for.
These both being Navy carrier-based planes, I don't see tail hooks on either of them. Did they have tail hooks?
I can speak to the Hellcat. Yes, it has a tail hook, and if you go around the back side, you'll see it's retracted into the fuselage. It extends electrically out. Maybe we can do a little demonstration
it still
afterwards.
functions.
Yeah, g'day. I've been lucky enough to fly the TB Avenger in Australia and display it, and this looks like a small Avenger. Is it very similar to the Grumman Avenger to fly and to land?
Thankfully, no. To land, yeah, it's simple, but maneuverability-wise, they are, you know, a battleship versus a PT boat. They're so different. I think. I don't like the TBM very much. It's really heavy on the controls. This is very light. It feels like what a fighter should feel like, I think.
Well, I was a bomber pilot in World War II, flying B-17s. And there's a... Thank you. Did 25 missions over Germany. And I'd just like to point out the vast difference between fighter pilots and bomber pilots. And I'd like for you to address, if you would, something about the armament on these two Navy fighters, which of course were from another theater of operations. But it appears that the Hellcat carried nothing but the 650 caliber machine guns. But the Bearcat apparently was a fighter/bomber. Is that not correct?
No,
Because you
not
apparently
really.
had some shackles on the outside, on the wings that could carry external bombs, or were those fuel tanks?
I don't think they had any bombers like that. Now, they did carry a fuel tank when they were trying to go somewhere because they don't have much internal fuel. But I don't know of any that were bombers.
Its design role was an interceptor, and it was great for that. I think in Vietnam they tried to make it close air support, and it did not do very well at all because that's not what it was designed for. Yeah, the Hellcat really is designed as an air-to-air aircraft. It's got, as you say, the 650 caliber machine guns. So same as a Mustang versus the 20 millimeter cannons that came along later. You look at the Hellcats, they did drop some bombs. That's really not what it was designed for. The Hellcat, the carriers with the Hellcat, they were going to go through, press ahead, and destroy the Japanese Navy. That was their role. And they had SBDs or later TBFs, TBMs, and Helldivers on those carriers to do the bombing role. And then later Corsairs, they were doing more air-to-ground work, but the Hellcat, it was designed to be up higher.
So yes, I was not a fighter pilot in World War II, but my father was hired by the Navy, and he actually worked in the Nash plant that may have made that engine. He supervised the line that made the pistons, and one day he retired. He refused a whole batch because they were out of tolerance, and he got called up, and the guy said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he said, "They're not right. They won't fit, and then we're all going to be in trouble." And he said, "Oh, all right. Well, God damn it, good job." So I want to thank you for bringing this. I've never seen one. My dad never got to see one, and he died 5 years ago. So.
Well, as someone who sits behind that engine, I'm really glad he was kicking the cylinders out if they weren't any good.
Got one here? I was curious about the range of the Hellcat, and how did they navigate in the Pacific with this vast ocean? Was it just dead reckoning, or did they have any radio aids?
To be honest, I can't find my way around without an iPad, so I have no clue. They have this map tray in there. You know what a map is? Remember those? They're around like with phone
That's
books
what
and everything
blows
like
out
that.
the window, isn't it?
That's right. I lose them out the window. Now, they have this map tray and a big plotting board, and I cannot imagine navigating around the Pacific, honestly, because not only does everything look the same, but your airfield keeps moving on you. So it must have been very challenging. These guys that went out and flew those missions, and when you read about some of these missions, especially when they were launching towards, they didn't know they're going to come back at night. And most of these pilots, they didn't do night carrier landings. They didn't know how to do that. They were extending these ranges out way beyond where they should, especially with the bombers. I know the SBDs, a lot of these missions, they came back and they're going to land in the water. They knew that. They're going to go out, they're going to hit the force and then come back and ditch in the water. The Hellcat had a bit of a longer range, and you asked about the night fighters earlier. During one of those battles, a Philippine Sea, it was the night fighters that went up and they were finding these aircraft because they're lost all over the ocean and trying to bring them back and get on any carrier you can. And they did a really, really brave thing at that point. They said, turn on the lights. Ships at night do not turn on the lights because these waters were full of Japanese subs, and that was very dangerous, but they turned on the lights so a lot of these naval aviators could get back on a boat, maybe not their boat, but a boat.
They would
Brutal.
ditch beside the boat just to get close.
There's a book called Night Flying Avenger about TBMs flying night missions for sub hunting in the North Atlantic. If you want to read something about navigation and stuff in there, it's a very interesting book, and it's pretty amazing what those guys did by dead reckoning time and plotting courses, getting around, and even to the point of airplanes finding each other once they found a sub and things. It's amazing. And I had a question for the gentleman from Australia that flew the TBM. Was it 337? That's the first airplane I restored. But I was just curious.
Are you next? Yes, sir.
For those, there's a question from the internet. For those of the folks that are watching around the country and around the world, they're curious about where would you find these airplanes after Oshkosh? Where are they going to be on display? Where can folks see these once they're done?
Well, the Collins, you're on tour. Are you on tour with this airplane, or are you on tour with the other airplanes?
The Hellcat is not on tour regularly with the other aircraft. It will be going from here to Valparaiso, Indiana, and it'll be on display with the Wings and Freedom Tour next week in Valparaiso. And then it will head back to the East Coast and will be at some of our New England tour stops, including Worcester.
Okay.
You go to cfdn.org, you can see the schedule for the Wings of Freedom Tour.
Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, you guys have been talking about connections with veterans. Have any of you gentlemen had an opportunity to talk to the early Blue Angel pilots who flew both of these aircraft?
I have not.
That's a shame.
Yes, sir.
Is this on?
I hope so, because you're talking.
My name's Robert Roth, and I just want to say I'm named after my grandpa who flew a Hellcat. My father, George Roth, is office manager for Warbirds Security. So just want to say it's a special week for everybody, but a little bit more special for me. So thanks again for the efforts to get it here.
I have a question.
The lady with the beautiful lady with the straw hat's got her.
This one's for Warren. When your airplane is fixed, completed, and ready to go, where can people see yours?
Hopefully in the sky. But
Well, that's a good answer.
It'll be at the Dakota Territory Air Museum in Minot, North Dakota. Thank you.
Okay, by the way, at the end of the Q&A, the little lady with the pretty hat, she's going to have a little basket, and she's got challenge coins. And for you people that don't know what a challenge coin is, the military people, they come up and ask for the coin. They know you have it, and if you don't have it, you have to buy them a beer. So that's what the challenge coins are for. And they're donated by the Fighters World War II Museum, that's Fagan Fighters Museum, excuse me, in Granite Falls, Minnesota. And while I'm making that point, I'd also like to mention the fact that you had a phone call there with a question, and that's coming from flyingtv.com. And they're over there in the little blue tent, there's a discount coupon that you can use to get on flyingtv.com. Kyle, how many different flying articles? There's 700 different items that you can look at in there, including all this Warbirds in review. All of them. Was there any more questions? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
A question for you about the Hellcat. What's the operating costs of the Hellcat? What kind of speeds do you use and on flying in on this and coming over the fence? Can you see the runway, or is it kind of blind?
The operational cost right now is probably somewhere around $300,000 an hour till we pay down the restoration. I don't know. It's it's a lot. I just want to say thanks to Gary out there, Carlos, Chris, some of the crew that restored this aircraft and did such a beautiful job are here.
Yeah, have them stand up. Have them stand up.
If it weren't for these guys and Vince and everyone back in the shop, Jeff and all the team, this airplane wouldn't be here. So it's a big thanks to them. Speed-wise, the airplane can come in pretty slow. It's indicating 80 knots. I think it's actually doing a little faster than 80 knots. It's a nice 3-point attitude with that. Cruising, it's showing 175. I think, again, that's slow. It's probably true more around 190, 200. What was the other part of the question? Anything else? Visibility. Oh, yeah, it's not bad. Cow flaps block most of my view, I think. That's the harder part.
Being able to see is overrated.
Sorry?
Being able to see is overrated.
Yeah, if you want to see where you're going, don't fly these airplanes.
One more question.
With the Bearcat, you mentioned that it was a collection of parts. Is there enough to build another aeroplane from it?
There's actually enough there for 2 more airplanes, or an airplane and a half anyway. But yeah, this project was being built, we were manufacturing parts for another project behind it that will be for sale eventually.
Well, thank you folks for coming. We appreciate it. And come back this afternoon at 1 o'clock and we have another show.